So, can you explain to me the difference between short count and long count?
Yeah, this is another very significant thing. Um, the short count is based on chronology, chronology, yeah, and even that word is a trick word, chronology, because you're dealing with white people's gods. So if you're talking about Egypt and then you say the chronological time, you're relating that to Kronos, who's the father of Zeus, who used to eat his children. So that word's a trick, chronology. So I rather say timeline, but what they do is because you got to understand Caucasians in the form they are now have only been on the planet 6,000 years. So their history starts at 4,000 BC, which is 6,000 years ago. Anything before that is called prehistory. Now, our people, black people, Indian people, have been on the planet 17,250,000 years. Okay? And we've been writing way before 6,000 years ago. So what the Caucasians do is they bring our dates up to match their dates because they don't want to admit that they're only 6,000 years old. Do you understand? So if they see something that's 30,000 years ago, let's say Pharaoh Menes unified Egypt, they'll take off a zero and say 3,000 years ago, my man unified Egypt because it's closer to their timeline, to Greece and Rome, and then they can give you this caveman timeline, how we was all dumb and wearing animal skins and we progressed in a linear way. Do you understand? So it's all a trick. So I use in my books the white man's dates because if I use my dates, like if I said in 30,000 BC Pharaoh Menes founded Egypt, most of the skeptics or the herd, they're going to close my book. Say, oh, this guy's gone to... Do you understand what I'm saying? Whether they're black or white, it's too... The figures are too high for people to... We've been conditioned to think that we've only been on the planet X amount of years. So what I do in my book, certain times I put both dates. Like let's say Mentuhotep II, Middle Kingdom. They say 2040 BC. You understand? I put a zero on the end of it. You understand that?
Yeah.
So it's not 2040 BC, it's 20,400 BC. You see what I'm saying?
Understood.
So I leave it for my readers to add a zero themselves, knowing that. So I sometimes put SC, which is short count, and then I'll put LC, which is long count. So you can see the difference. Sometimes I might only use one and put SC. Sometimes I might use both, so you can see, okay, I can see this here, 3,100 BC or 3,100 BC. They take a zero off all of our dates. So you can't trust none of the dates the white man gives you. But because this is the first book in the series, I'm going to use the short count to give you the white man's dates. So by the time you get into the series, you can now understand, okay, yeah, SC is the short count, which white people use to bring us up to their timeline. But according to our ancestors, we go back way further. Egypt was founded 40,000 BC, 40,100 BC. We say today 4,125 BC. And that's a revised date because white people say 3,100 BC. But I say it was even 1,000 years before that because it was before Sumeria and they had proto-dynastic kings in the Sudan thousands of years before Egypt. Do you understand? But they hide all that. So I use both, but that's the difference between the short count, which is a white man thing, and the long count, which is dealing with the ancestors and dealing with the facts and the records that state and show that black people go back 17,250,000 years.
Thank you for explaining. So, what inspired you to write this book?
I seen a quote that said, if you can't find a book that you want, write it. And I don't think that ever left me because I think that I've always been playing with writing books and I've always been a writer, whether it's writing songs or poems or doing essays, history essays for school. I've never really had a problem with writing. So when I seen that, when it says, oh, if you can't find a book that you want, write it. And as I said in the initial questioning, I felt like Treasures in the Sand wasn't out there. Don't get me wrong, I've got a lot of people that I look up to, especially our teachers like Ivan van Sertima, they came before Columbus, and Sheikh Anta Diop, the African origins of civilization, myth or reality. Like I have most of them books, and hats off to them guys. But like I was saying, I think it was to you in another conversation, them guys was like 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I needed an update on what they bought. I don't want to hear what somebody said 50 years ago. I wanted to find out, well, what have we found out since then? Since these guys came and unearthed our glorious history, what have we done to add on to that? Do you understand? Yeah. And I couldn't really find a book that could speak in nowadays language, let's say from 2000 upwards. So I decided to write it myself. That's where the inspiration came from.
That's
Yeah.
inspiring.
And at the time, I would say I was in jail. So it was a way for me to keep my head out of jail and find a way to cope with the situation. So that's where the inspiration came for me to write that scroll.
That's amazing. So, why did you feel the need to revise Treasures in the Sand?
I felt the need to revise it because I'm a very um, what should I say, the long-winded. Do you understand? So that can overwhelm a lot of people. And then also, I printed it with a really little font. I think it was on about 11. And so there was a lot of people, especially from the elderly community, that was like, oh, San, I can't read this writing, it's too small. Strain their eyes. And then there was other people that I can't get into it because the writing's not big enough. They needed a bigger print, a bolder print, so the book can hold them. And I had it from a few people well, which was a bit disappointing because when I published the book, I wasn't thinking about none of that. I was just enthusiastic about publishing this book. So I never considered that some people with visual impairment or older people might not be able to read that print. So that was the reason, and the only reason why I revised it. I thought it's going to miss a lot of people if I just leave it like that. And the people that were saying that to me was very important people in my upbringing and stuff. I wanted them to read it. So I think it was because of that made me think, yeah, I'm going to have to revise the book and try and make the language a bit simpler instead of, there was a lot of academic words and a lot of intellectual stuff in the initial book.